morning to everybody. I am very pleased to open this session devoted to a very important topic, which is sustainability and circular economy. We have two first-class panelists with us this morning, and I thank Esben and Aleksandra to be with us. Aleksandra is from Poland. Aleksandra is an university graduated chemist, and you recently joined LPP, which is a major leading fashion company in Poland with 5 major brands. I saw that, and more than 20,000 employees. And you joined the company quite recently, and you are at LPP Sustainable Development Specialist. And I'm also very glad to welcome Esben. Esben, you are an academic, you are professor at the Copenhagen Business School in this very nice city of Copenhagen. And your research focuses on innovation and organization, including corporate sustainability and corporate social responsibility. I propose to start with you, Esben, since you have a more general view on the topic. I noticed that you are interested in the future agenda for sustainability and circular economy. You will tell us a few words, and also you made a survey on the situation of the sustainability during the pandemic, which is not finished yet, and I think it would be interesting also to have some views on it. So you have 30 minutes, and then I will give the floor to Aleksandra, and finally we will have a Q&A with the audience. So Esben, the floor is yours, and thanks again to be with us this morning.
Thank you very much for the invitation to say something at this event. I'm an academic, which means that we are, of course, always a little abstract and fluffy, but luckily we have Aleksandra to compensate for that afterwards. I will try to give let's say, a broad overview of some of the research that we have been doing for quite a number of years. I should start by saying that I'm not the only one doing research on sustainability and fashion. We are actually quite a few people at Copenhagen Business School who has done research on fashion and sustainability for a number of years. And what I will essentially try to present today is a few snapshots of some of the research that we have been doing. And as Dominique also mentioned, I will just very briefly say something about sustainable fashion in the COVID-19 period. We did a survey last year during the pandemic, and actually just after the fall, we will actually do a new one to see if there has been changes in the way companies are kind of approaching sustainability during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I will only say something about the first period, but if we repeat the session next year, I can also talk about the evolution of sustainability. Very shortly, I have done research on sustainable fashion for 10 years or more, and it was actually quite a coincidence. We started having a discussion with Danish Fashion Institute about some research, and that evolved into a lot of other things. So we have both kind of done work on, I would say, traditional research, surveys, case studies, experiments, and so on. But we also try to kind of bring out the knowledge to the practitioners. I will say a little about it, but I mean, we have participated in a number of events, and we have also developed a lot of online training material on sustainability and sustainable fashion, because we saw that was kind of missing. Today, I will mostly say something about research. And I will actually try to follow slavishly some of the development in our research, starting from, again, around 2009, 2010, and until today, some of the research that we have been doing. I should start by saying that there's always this discussion when you talk about sustainability, what is it all about? And that is, I think, also very important, both in theory and practice when it comes to fashion, because there's not one fixed definition of sustainability, and a lot of people have different views on sustainability and whether it's possible to be sustainable and how much is enough and so on. And when you talk about fashion, there are people who simply say that sustainable fashion is kind of an oxymoron or a contradiction of term. You cannot be fashionable and sustainable at the same time. So I think this is kind of an endless debate I will not delve into today. I would perhaps take the view that I would say sustainability is more a matter of degree than an all or nothing affair. So therefore it's better to see, okay, how can you kind of change the organization towards more sustainable pattern, instead of saying that unless you do this and this and this, then it doesn't make sense to talk about sustainability. But it's more than an academic debate, because quite a few companies who have been criticized for lack of sustainability over the years, it has actually very much been based on the definition of sustainability, that people promise too much and talk about sustainability in a very relaxed way, and it can attract all type of criticism. So I think it's actually very important that people are careful about how they talk about sustainability. And it's actually also something that is increasingly brought to the courtroom. If you are kind of using it maybe in a too relaxed way, then you can actually end in court and get a fine for greenwashing. I will say a little about that. So my position is, and I think that is also reflected in our research, is to see sustainability more as a continuum, that there is, the very much risk-based approach, doing little or nothing, and then there's a very innovative approach to sustainability, where you're much more proactive, listen more to stakeholders, try to think of new business models and so on. And that has actually been a recurrent issue throughout our research. Instead of having a very ideological perspective on sustainability and CSR and so on, saying, okay, what are companies doing and what is actually more and what is kind of less when it comes to sustainability. Because also the viewing sustainability as a matter of degree, I think it's almost inevitably the case when it comes to sustainability and sustainable fashion, because there's no brand, no company that can actually do everything. So all companies have to make some prioritization, some trade-off, selecting some things and not others. And therefore, I mean, no matter how you go about it, there will be something that you focus more on than others. And therefore, I think it's maybe more interesting also to talk about where the questions that you can actually ask to sustainability. Again, should you only focus on the product? Should you only focus on what the company is doing, or should you include the whole supply chain and so on? There's a lot of different discussion that you need to take internally in a company. Also, the discussion I briefly touched upon about the communication. There's a lot of people who maybe communicate too much about sustainability or put themselves at risk by maybe overselling sustainability. But there's also people who actually under-communicate about sustainability and never talk about it, even though they do a lot of good stuff in the field of sustainability, which is also kind of maybe a problem. So there's a lot of questions that are important when we talk about sustainability in fashion and in general. And that, I think, is also another argument for looking at as a more of a continuum than an either or, so to speak. So I will just maybe start by our research journey actually began again, I think in 2009, 2010, where we started to get interested in this fashion industry and sustainability and what are companies actually doing, because fashion company and fashion brands in general has attracted a lot of criticism over the years, and there's actually research indicating that the fashion industry is kind of the by far the most targeted industry for certain types of criticism regarding sustainability, especially when it comes to labor issues, global supply chain, and so on. So we started to get interested in why is it that fashion companies are kind of attracting all this criticism, and what is it that they are doing in response to this criticism. That was actually our starting point. And I will not do a whole lecture about the theory behind it, but I would say that also based on this idea of a continuum, there's a lot of literature talking about, you know, either you are a bad company or a good company, or either you are kind of a reactive company or proactive company, or all different types of ways to kind of frame sustainability as either you are the evil one or the good one. And maybe that's not so fruitful. It's maybe more interesting again to talk about this continuum of sustainability from a more, I would say, reactive stance, where you respond to a stakeholder demand, to a more proactive stance where you also try to foresee stakeholder demands, foresee the trends in the market, try to experiment with new approaches, and so on. And that was essentially our starting point for doing sustainability research. So to make a long story short, we developed this scale where we again have either a company could be very resistant to the whole idea of sustainability and CSR. They could conform to CSR demands from stakeholders, or they could kind of be more proactive, innovative when it comes to CSR and sustainability. That was kind of our starting point. And I think the results were kind of clear. I will not delve too much into the detail, but the large majority of fashion companies, and perhaps not surprisingly, are what we can call compliers. It doesn't really matter if the demands come from the owners or the customers, the consumers, and so on. The large majority of companies are kind of compliers. When they meet a demand, then they kind of comply with it, and that's I don't think it's that unique for fashion companies. It may be a little more pronounced, because if there's something that fashion companies are good at, it's responding to new trends and demands and so on. That's the nature of the business, so to speak. We also saw that a few companies were resistant to the whole idea of sustainability and CSR, but that was kind of a small minority. And then what we found was, of course, there was a small minority who was very proactive when it comes to sustainability. And that was essentially the starting point for us to actually look at this particular type of companies, because we thought that it would actually be more fun to kind of look at the companies which did a lot within the field of sustainability than looking at all the resistant ones that just would fight it to the bitter end. And that was essentially the starting point for us looking into companies who are kind of exploring new business models for sustainability within the fashion industry. I think today this whole idea of business model is known to many of you, but again, it's this classic idea that it's about the logic or the architecture of business. And most of you have seen this business model canvas by Osterwalder and Pineur, which again try to put companies and the partners into this template made of 4 components, and it has been massively popular over the 10 to 15 years now. But it has also attracted a lot of critique from sustainability scholars. So even though there's not one fixed formula for sustainability, there are some I would say, fundamental critiques of the classic view of business model when you talk about sustainability. So very, very shortly, one of the critique is this idea that business is a linear system. There are some suppliers, there's some processing going on, and then there's some customers at the end. That has been a source of critique from sustainability scholars. Another critique is this, I would say, narrow stakeholder perspective, where you only focus on customers and to some extent on suppliers. That has been another fundamental critique, where sustainability is mostly rooted on a broader view of who are the constituents of the company. Then there's been a critique of the value. It's not only value for customers, it's also value for the environment, it's also value for society that needs to be included. And there has also been a discussion about who should actually be counted as partners. Should it only be the direct business partner, direct suppliers, or should it also be the suppliers, or the local communities, or a lot of other scholars? Then, of course, there's also been this view that maybe it's too narrow to talk about economic cost of benefits. And finally, there has been discussions about what is actually the boundaries of a business model. Should it be limited to a single organization, or should it actually be viewed more generally to look at the context? Can you ignore the regulatory context? Probably not. Can you ignore, again, the countries and the communities that you operate in, and so on? So there's been all this criticism of this fundamental business model that has sparked a lot of criticism. And again, there's a lot of things can be said about it, but I think fundamentally it's about sustainable business model. It's about a broader understanding of value, as mentioned here, a broader understanding of stakeholder, a broader perspective of what is the role of business in society. And then there's been this criticism also about short-termism versus long-termism, so to speak, that in order to be sustainable, you need to think about the long term, which may also conflict a little bit with some of the ideas of fast fashion. And then circular thinking is popular. So that was kind of the introduction lecture. What we essentially did was then to look at a lot of different business models within the field of fashion. I cannot talk a lot about all of them, but we have looked, for instance, about the whole recycling industry. We have looked at sharing business model, take-back systems, local manufacturing, probably also a number of others. And I think overall what we found was that a lot of these initiatives have been fairly small scale and has sometimes been very difficult to scale up. Also because they have been very much dependent, at least some of them, some of the entrepreneurial initiatives at least, on the enthusiasm and commitment of a very few individuals, and therefore when they move along, the business models sometimes kind of fall apart. But I would say, there's hope in the sense that we are seeing now more and more companies are actually adopting some of the ideas originally introduced by some of these small-scale entrepreneurs 10 years ago. So you see some of the big brands is starting to experiment with, the whole leasing models. You see different types of, second-hand solutions of some of the major players, and big fashion brands starting to introduce second-hand within their own flagship stores and so on. And I think that is kind of a development that we see now, that more and more of the, I would say, mainstream players are taking up some of the ideas originally started by some, I would say, rather peripheral players in the market. But that is something that has taken a lot of attention for us over the past 5 to 10 years. We have also looked into some of the, I would say, organizational determinants of sustainability and business model innovation for sustainability. And I will not bore you with the detail, but what we clearly found was that flexible organization. That's what we mean by organizational values here. Companies which are characterized by a high degree of flexibilities, they are more innovative, they are more sustainable, and they are more financially profitable than more, I would say, rigid organization in the field of fashion. That is quite evident. So I think that's also very much something that people should be aware of, that if you want to work with sustainability, if you want to work with innovation and so on, then you need to look at the fundamental organizational structure within the company, because otherwise it will be very difficult to drive the necessary changes. So again, a company that's not flexible, it will have a really hard time changing towards sustainability. And I've actually seen that also when interviewing sustainability practitioners in different fashion brands and so on, where they also, in the companies which are very innovative, it's much more easy to transform organizations than in, I would say, more conservative brands where some sustainability practitioners kind of consider themselves as being a little bit on the sideline and having difficulties actually getting in, convincing some of the, I would say, more powerful departments to change their practices. That's quite evident. And then I'm kind of proud because I think researchers are usually criticized for only being interested in journal publications, and that's probably true to a large extent. But in this case, we also kind of transformed all of the research we did into training, online training program, which we made available on Coursera. And I would say that COVID-19 pandemic was actually very good at in order to market this sustainable fashion massive open online course MOOC, because we saw that as companies were locking down in the first part of the pandemic, the demand for this online training modules simply exploded. So it has been the pandemic has been good for us, so to speak, in order to kind of talk more about sustainable fashion with practitioners, and especially actually from developing countries, which have been very positively. We have received very positive responses for this MOOC from India and so on. I should also mention the consumer perspective, because that was also part of our work on sustainable business model. Because of course consumers are important, because if you don't have consumer buy-in, it will be impossible to actually talk about circularity. It will be impossible to develop some financially viable business model overall. And what we can see is also there's quite a lot of difference in how consumers, at least when they express the support to different business models, how they view different business models. So one of my good colleagues, Vinke Kvotz, and some of her colleagues made this survey, and it's quite clear that the whole idea of fashion leasing was not considered that popular by the large majority of consumers. Whereas repair services, that was much easier maybe to kind of attract positive vibes about, and online resale was also mainly, I would say, positive, irrespective of the market segment, perhaps especially the high-end markets. So when we talk about sustainable business models for fashion and so on, it's also important to mention that there's also a big difference between them, and some will have a more difficult time than others when you look at what actually consumers think and want from the market. But I think it's actually quite consistent with some of the research that we have seen in other places as well, that the whole resale market, e-commerce market is kind of getting more and more popular. especially online, and more fashion brands is kind of tapping into this market. Whereas these more, I would say, time-consuming and business model that require more commitment from the consumers is much more difficult to get some scale on these business models. Barriers, I think I mentioned a few of them, but of course we looked into that as well, both when it comes to circularity and sustainability more generally. I think the infrastructure, and I don't think it's a big surprise for some sustainable business model, for instance, the whole recycling system is not always that developed. So there's need for more regulation, there's need for more players in the markets. Sometimes there's also the whole accounting for sustainability, how to figure out which models work and what are the kind of sustainability consequences of different models. It can also be quite complicated. There's sometimes a lack of demand, as I mentioned, for certain type of business model. And then the one I mentioned on the top was this whole idea of value. That's, I think, important for all sustainable business model, but very important for when you talk about circularity. I think I have an example here. This is from an article we did together with some designers, where they made a speculative design and then actually tried to figure out how could you actually get a garment to work towards two different business models throughout the functional lifetime of this particular garment. And again, you start by selling the dress, and then you share it with family, and then you go to the second-hand shop, and then you make it available online, and then you maybe when it's totally worn out, then you can maybe turn it into other garment products, and then eventually it can be discarded. I think we have a very ambitious model here, but it's just about thinking about what is actually the requirements for a shirt to actually travel around and around in the system throughout the functional lifetime of the garment. And we actually concluded that one of the key barriers is this whole idea of value, because there has to be value enough for the shirt to travel to the next stage. There has to be a new stakeholder, a new actor who thinks that this particular garment, I can get more value from that than is actually worse, so to speak. And that is kind of a problem, because very few companies are used to design clothes or garments that has value for actors further down the road, so to speak. So a designer in a fashion company, they don't think necessarily about the second-hand shop who will get this clothes maybe 5 years down the road and so on. So thinking about how we can kind of build more value into the garments and how we can make sure that we design products throughout the functional lifetime of the garments is quite important for circularity to work, because otherwise we'll just throw it out, essentially. And then the dangers, I think that is actually something we look into now, and we'll probably explore also further in the years to come. Is this fear of greenwashing, so to speak, because it's very nice that you make all these experiments with new sustainable business model, but it also comes with a lot of risk when it comes to accusations of greenwashing. And what I think is sometimes unfortunate is that some of the, I would say, well-intentioned attempts to develop sustainable business models are sometimes portrayed as greenwashing just because they are not as successful as people originally anticipated. And that's of course something that maybe refrain some actors from actually exploring new sustainable business models, that they fear that they will attract criticism because maybe they have promised too much, or maybe they're disappointed about the demand for these sustainable business model. I think I have a very short example here. This take-back bins that you saw a few years ago in all big fashion brands, where you ask consumers basically to get back with the old clothes, and then sometimes you gave them a voucher to buy new, or you gave them other incentives to participate. And a lot of things can be said about that. Maybe in some cases it was greenwashing, but what you can at least say is that instead of, let's say, creating maybe a positive hype, at least academically, it's almost created a negative hype, because all peoples were kind of saying that, okay, they have these small take-back bins, but look at all the clothes they sell. So aren't these companies who try to promote these take-back system, aren't they kind of greenwashing companies? So actually, companies who try to experiment with something new, they almost attracted criticism rather than maybe applause for the attempts to try something new, which I think is somehow problematic. But it also comes down to maybe the communication of sustainability, where some of the brands maybe was overselling the merits of this particular initiative too much. But I think it is kind of a key paradox of sustainability that on the one hand, you are kind of expected to do something innovative and new and so on, but if you fail by doing it, then you can easily attract criticism for greenwashing from outside. Then finally, COVID-19. Has it changed anything? Not so much, actually, according to our research. I would say that, of course, and that's perhaps not a big surprise, that finance and accounting has become more important for a lot of fashion companies during the COVID-19 periods. However, we didn't really see the death of sustainability. That was actually something that we kind of feared a little bit, that every fashion brand would kind of stop doing sustainability when the crisis hit. We saw actually no evidence of that. We saw that some kind of sustainability initiatives were paused or stopped in the short run, but all the companies who had a history for working with sustainability, they were still working with sustainability. And that all perhaps makes sense. Firstly, I think the whole market for sustainability has been institutionalized, as we like to talk it. There's more certifications, there's more labels, there's a lot of different ways of doing sustainability that is more or less automatic. And companies do not necessarily stop with that when a crisis hit. Also, I think the people working in fashion brands, they don't unlearn sustainability just because there's a crisis. So if sustainability is on the mind, it will also be on the mind when a crisis hits. But of course, when you are in a survival mode, then there will be something that is more important than others, and that perhaps also what we have seen here. We will do, as I mentioned, a new survey later this year, and then we can hopefully say more about how things have changed since then. It might also have something to do, and I think I have it here, about how companies are doing sustainability. Because sometimes it may be the more, I would say, product-related sustainability activities that companies are dealing with, at least this is among Danish companies. So again, you have removed some polluting materials, you have introduced organic cotton and so on. And that's maybe something that you can easily keep also during a crisis, whereas it's more difficult to start a whole new staff training on sustainability or introduce new bonus system for sustainability when you're facing a crisis. So maybe the finding that we didn't really see this big stop on sustainability also has something to do with how companies are approaching sustainability in the market. Finally, I think sustainable fashion is here to stay, and I think that's pretty evident. And a lot of things are also becoming increasingly institutionalized. But it's also, I think, important to note that a lot of the current approaches to sustainability are, I would say, maybe fairly low commitment. It's about, again, certifications and labels, and perhaps not so much about changing the fundamental business model at this stage. But I think we are seeing more of it to come. And then finally, to steal one of the models from one of my colleagues, Kai Hoggerts, I think in order to address sustainability in the future fashion market, we both need the small entrepreneurs and the big mainstream players. I think that was everything from me. If you have questions, I will of course be glad to take them, but I don't know if we should save them for the end of the session. Thank you.
Yes, Esben, thank you very much. For the questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end after Aleksandra presentation. I would like to thank you very much for your communication, very clear, very inspiring. You took, a business model perspective and not, as you mentioned it, an ideological, and I think it was very interesting. Now we will hear Aleksandra. She's a practitioner, and I am sure she could answer some questions you raised, Esben. For instance, the question of prioritization, trade-off, which is very important, and also what's happened at LPP with the COVID as far as sustainability is concerned. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Aleksandra. You have 30 minutes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Can you see my screen? Because I shared it, but can you see my screen?
Yes, it's good.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Great. Okay, so thank you very much for introduction, and thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure, and good morning, everyone. One more time, my name is Aleksandra Pawelec, and I am a sustainability specialist in LPP. Oh, sorry. It's okay. So first, let me briefly introduce our company. So LPP is a Polish clothing company, a Polish clothing producer based in Gdańsk. We have almost 30 years of experience in designing and selling clothes and accessories. We own 5 well-known fashion labels, which are Reserved, Cropp, House, Mohito, and Sinsay. And each of these brands has its own features and target group. So LPP is now present in 39 countries around the world with its online and offline operations, including stores on high streets of London, Berlin, and Munich. So we do not have own factories, and the majority of production is sourced from suppliers from the Far East. Part is produced in Europe, including Poland. So we strive for continuous growth of LPP and its transformation into a global company with brands recognizable worldwide. We are trying to continuously improve our offer, and we're trying to adapt it to the ever-changing customers' expectations. So our collections are more and more accessible thanks to the extension of our traditional stores network by increasing commercial floor space as well as our online stores. So as you can see, we are developing very dynamically, but at the same time, we want to develop wisely. Therefore, since 2019, our development is in line with the sustainable strategy. So we strive to be fair in every step of the way. And entitled For People, For Our Planet, our sustainable development strategy is a response to the urgent climate challenges that we face today. As you can see, we have decided to focus on environmental goals, because this is the state of the environment that determines the future and the quality of life for all the people of the planet. I have a citation too. So the idea of sustainable development is summarized and showed in the first two sentences of WCED report of 1987 called Our Common Future. And it says, on current civilization level, sustainable development is possible. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So the role of sustainable development in the economic context has definitely gained importance in the last few years. The rapid technological and economic evolution allowed the development of almost every branch of the business, which at the same time caused the elevation of the needs of the present generation, but not out of necessities, but out of possibilities, which is good because our lives are getting better. Yet this process is so fascinating that we blindly started to neglect the importance of balanced growth in exchange for pleasing our more and more elevated needs. So simply we forgot about our surrounding a little bit, and we started to be a little bit selfish. So now we not only need to take actions for getting back to balanced growth, but we also need to repair the damages that we have done. And especially we need to take more care for our environment, which is now extremely badly affected. So there are 5 main types of pollution troubling our planet, and that are air, water, soil, light, and noise. And all of these are harmful to us, but without a doubt, air pollution and water pollution pose the biggest threat. So fashion industry is a business sector with huge potential to reduce environmental impact and not only its own impact. That is because besides applying changes in our closest environment, in example, in our stores and in our offices, we can also influence our suppliers to introduce more sustainable practices in production processes. And on the other hand, we can support our customers on how to use clothes in a more sustainable way. So, in fact, these days, our customers are the ones who drives us to be more sustainable, because every day they are more and more aware of danger connected with overconsumption of environmental resources, and they are just simply demanding actions from us. What is worth mentioning, though, that our customers demanding more sustainable products, but in fact they are still not willing to pay more for such products, because let's be clear, such products cost more. But anyway, we want to adapt to demands, and we are doing it. So as I mentioned before, air pollution and water pollution pose the biggest threat to our environment. And the fashion industry accounts for about 10% of global carbon emissions, and nearly 20% of wastewater worldwide comes from fabric dyeing and treatment. And we know that this is a lot. And now I will tell you how LPP is putting an effort to lower our impact in those two fields. So in case of carbon footprint, first of all, we measured our GHG emissions and identified the field in which emissions account for a majority of whole GHG emissions. And we found out without surprise that Scope 3 accounts for over 90% of whole emissions. And what is Scope 3? So Scope 3 covers the whole life cycle of a product, from obtaining the materials and manufacturing the finished goods, through packaging and all of the logistics, to product care by the customer, and to the end of use. So we set our goal to reduce our carbon footprint by 15% till 2025. And what is most important, this goal, which we set in 2019 for a period of 5 years, is in line with SBTi's well below 2 degrees aligned emission reduction target. So to achieve this goal, we decided to take actions mostly in our Scope 3 emissions. So first of all, we strive to ensure that the largest possible part of the LPP's brands collections is made of materials that are characterized by lower consumption of natural resources and lower CO2 emissions. And this is the basis of our EcoWare materials standard. So here on the slides, you can see examples of materials compliant with EcoWare standard and at the same time with a lower than conventional global warming potential, which is based on Higgs MSI score. And that are organic fibers, such as organic cotton, commonly used in our collections, that are biodegradable cellulose fibers, and also recycled fibers that are certified according to international standards, like polyester, cotton, wool, and polyamide. And in 2020, 18.6% of clothing from all of our brands were collections signed with EcoWare. And year by year, we increased the share of the EcoWare materials in our collections, which at the same time allow us to lower our carbon footprint in this particular category of Scope 3. Okay, so that was the raw materials. And now, from the perspective of global environmental challenges for the clothing industry, the production processes are of particular importance. And in 2019, we also started our EcoWare production standard, which setting the requirements that factories must meet in terms of reducing the use of natural resources in the whole production processes. So among those requirements are aspects that directly affect GHG emissions, such as reduction of energy consumption by implementing energy-saving devices, introduction of energy recovery systems, an appropriate level of use of renewable energy, and introduction of metering in factories. So by the end of 2021, 30% of all factories will already be covered by our EcoWare production program. And by 2023, the standard will cover 100% of jeans factories. So thanks to these activities, we not only reduce our own GHG emissions, but also we help to reduce the emissions of the regions where factories covered by our EcoWare production program are located. And moreover, we help to lower other fashion brands' carbon footprint who just use the same factories. Let's now move to the packaging, the next step. So in LPP, we use two basic packaging materials that are plastic and cardboard. And in case of plastic, LPP is a signatory of New Plastic Economy Global Commitment by Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the Polish Plastics Pact, in which we jointly work towards an elimination of unnecessary and problematic plastic packaging. And still now, we have completely eliminated single-use plastics in online shipments of the Reserve and Mohito brands, which allowed us to eliminate 300 tons of this raw material from circulation. Also, we use only recycled plastic in all House, Cropp and Sinsay online order shipments. We reduced disposable foil used for package samples by 50%. Already 100% of all price tags are free from foil, and 90% of the bags from our suppliers are from recycling and can be recycled. And in case of cardboard, this year, in 2021, we started a cooperation with Canopy to support approaches in which primary and endangered forests will not be used for the production of packaging. So we will influence our supply chain to protect the world's remaining primary endangered forests and also the habitats of endangered species. So for now, we can say that all Reserved and Mohito e-commerce boxes are from recycling. 50% of the cartons from our suppliers are reused by us. Additional cardboard boxes purchased for distribution centers come from recycling, and we recycle almost 100% of the cardboard boxes used in fulfillment centers and 20% used in distribution centers. And till 2023, we want to have 100% of packaging materials in our stores made from recycling materials, and till 2025, 100% of plastics used in our packaging will be fit to be reused, recycled, or composted. So, as you can see, actions taken with plastic and paper materials are also connected with our commitment to be a more circular company. Okay, so now let's move to the use of sold products, or so-called product care. So product care is entirely in the hands of our customers. And our task as a clothing manufacturer is to educate our customers on how to care for their clothes in a more sustainable way. So in the near future, we plan to launch an educational campaign aimed at making our customers aware that less frequent washing and also washing at lower temperatures, use of the air drying instead of tumble dryers, and less ironing can positively affect our environment by reducing the consumption of water, consumption of electricity, and also washing detergents. So such activities not only reduce not only our company's carbon footprint, but maybe what is most important, a user's carbon footprint. And additionally, reduce the amount of washing detergents released into surface water. And now a little bit about the end of use and about those take-back bins which Professor mentioned before in his presentation. So to be more circular company, we need to also engage our customers. So our stores collect used clothing, which is then donated to people in a difficult life situation. And this allows at once to fulfill our social mission and to reduce our environmental impact. So in selected stores through Poland, customers can bring the clothes they are no longer need, and no matter of the brand, it not have to be LPPs, and they can leave them in specially marked containers. Clothes which are collected in this way are distributed to people in need through Towarzystwo Pomocy imienia Świętego Brata Alberta, which runs the night shelters for people experiencing the crisis of homelessness around Poland. And pandemic situation slowed down our program a little bit, since people are not so eager in donating clothes, but still we have planned to introduce clothing collection system in all our stores by 2023. So that was a carbon footprint. And now let's move to the second important aspect, which is water security. Water security means actions that we take to take care of water resources. And the most important issue which fashion industry faces in case of water security is the use of various chemicals during production of clothes. And without a doubt, this is unavoidable, but we can follow the path towards eliminating harmful substances from production processes and to use only those which are safe to people and for the environment. And to do so, in 2020, as the first Polish company, which we are very proud of, LPP joined to ZDHC, Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals. And the mission of ZDHC is to enable the textile, apparel, and footwear industry to implement best practices on sustainable chemical safety through the entire supply chain. By setting new standards and their implementation with the joint involvement of research and academic centers, fashion brands, suppliers, and also producers of chemicals used for treatment of textiles, it aims to eliminate hazardous substances in the whole clothing industry. And as a friend of ZDHC, we are obligated to urge our suppliers to completely eliminate harmful substances from production processes. And with addition, we support them in managing chemicals in such a way that they use them as little as possible. And by doing so, we also increase the safety of the employees who are directly responsible for the production processes. So, in fact, we take care not only for environment, but also for our customers who get safe product, and for our suppliers who just produces for us. And to this day, 55% of our suppliers from Bangladesh and 69% of our suppliers from Pakistan are already members of ZDHC. We are constantly encouraging our other suppliers to join to the initiative. They can count on our full support in the process of joining and also in the process of implementing of ZDHC principles. And what we have in exchange is lab testing results of post-industrial water and wastewater that our suppliers release, which tests are obligatory for them. So basically, we can check if any of the restricted chemical substances are released into environment and what is the quality of post-industrial water treatment. And if we find any non-compliance, we actively help our suppliers to identify the reason of such non-compliance and support them with improving their results. And moreover, we can have access to our suppliers' list of chemicals that they use in production of our clothes with classification of their compatibility with ZDHC requirements. And now to illustrate why it is so important to adopt the ZDHC standards in our industry, I would like to use my favorite historical example, the Mad Hatter disease. So this disease existed at the turn of the 18th and 19th centuries, when for producing of hats, a mercury nitrate was used, which was useful in the formation of furfelt in hats. And back then, no one was aware that prolonged inhalation of the mercury vapors that were released upon exposure to heat, or in some cases, the ingestion of the element can lead to mental and physical disorders among employees responsible for production of hats. And also, residues of the mercury in some cases also affected customers. So this is why it's so important to remember that eliminating of harmful chemicals is beneficial for environment, for customers, and for workers that are producing our clothes. So to sum up, speaking about sustainability and in environmental aspects, for us, reduction of air and water pollutions are of particular importance. And in case of air pollution, we are focused on reduction of our carbon footprint, primarily in scope 3, which accounts for 90% of our GHG emissions, and cover indirect emissions, which are resulting from production and use of sold products. And in case of water pollutions, we want to reduce the use of harmful chemical substances during production of clothes, which is the most important issue which fashion industry faces in case of water security. And that will be all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aleksandra.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting real business case. We had the chance with your communication, to enter LPP company and to see how you manage sustainability by these current times. So we are going to open the questions. I see one question for you, Aleksandra. The question is the following: what do you do with clothes collected for homeless people which are not proper to donate, too damaged, or not useful?
Okay, so there are some of that kind of clothes which are not useful for people to be reused. And we have plans for very exciting projects, which unfortunately I can't tell more about it now, but we are aware that especially in case of polyester clothes, it's very hard to put it away from our environment, to put it in a circular way. But we are working from that. We are now collecting it. And we will work with some I would love to say that about this project, but unfortunately I can't. But we are working toward complete elimination from open loop, from completely maybe, sorry. We are working to all of those reduced clothes to be in closed loop. Yes, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aleksandra, there is a second question to you. You mentioned you educate consumer on product care, and the question is, how do you share the caring details with the customers? Which tool, which medium or methods do you use for that?
Okay, so this project is also will be run in the next couple of months, I believe. We will educate our customers probably by doing some online campaigns, or maybe some lectures in schools. I don't know. We don't know it yet. But most important, we will encourage our customers to check these labels with washing instructions, to be more careful when they choose how to wash or how to iron their clothes. So this product is will be in the near future. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Any other question? I have a question to Esben. I think there is an interesting issue, which is that on the one hand, we have to face environmental urgency, and on the other hand, we have the companies, and they need time to deliver progress. So how do you see, is it this contradiction, or to match the two?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, of course. I think it depends very much on what sustainability issue we talk about. I was happy, for instance, that Aleksandra, for instance, mentioned this whole issue of water issues and water security and so on, because I think this is a problem that can be addressed, but maybe it's also difficult for companies to address them single-handedly, because it's a sector problem, and it's a problem in the countries where you kind of produce the clothes and so on. So I think that should be something that companies have to work with the governments, and we have to work with to solve it. And it can, I wouldn't say easily, but it can be solved, some of these water issues, because you can clean practically all water. It's more a matter of the price tag that you put on it, and maybe it's difficult for individual companies to make all the investment. But of course, it's easier when it's an issue which have both economic and environmental consequences, where there's what we'd like to call win-win potential. One issue that I think a lot of people are discussing now, but also maybe people don't want to discuss too much, is this whole online sales issue, where people return way too much clothes, and they circle around, and companies spend a lot of money on return goods from online sales, because people order 2 or 3 pair of jeans and then they return either all of them or one of them, and it has some big impact environmentally, but it also has some fairly big impact economically for some of the brands. So there's been discussion about what can you actually do to avoid some of these return goods, both from a financial point of view and from a sustainability point of view. And of course, it's easier if there's both a business case and a sustainability case. But of course, all companies cannot solve all problems in the world. So I think that there has to be some prioritization.
Thank you. Aleksandra, do you have something to say about it?
No, not exactly, sorry.
But it makes me think, another issue, which is, if you take, for instance, a fashion company, probably and say that only 10% of the sustainability issues are within the scope of the company, and probably 90% are with the supply chain, the outside suppliers upstream. So it could be a question for both of you. How do you think that the fashion companies, they address the fact that, most of the issues are outside, their business and I would say perimeter?
So in my opinion, that is right. The most issues is outside of our business, but we believe that we know our value chain as much as we can for now. So we can take actions, as I mentioned, with our suppliers, and we can take actions with our customers, because we are in some way we are in the middle of this. right? We can let's say affect our suppliers and also help to our customers. So this is mutual work, right? All of the value chain.
Thank you very much. Another question to you, Aleksandra. What kind of dyes and dyeing processes do you use at LPP? Are they sustainable for planet and for people?
What kind of dyes? So as I mentioned, we do not have own factories, but we audit of our factories. If we, because of pandemic, cannot go now to our factories to check if everything is okay, if they are using right chemicals. We have also our office in Dhaka, in Bangladesh. So we can ask our workers from outside offices to go to audit our factories. So they are using the dyes which should be compatible with ZDHC requirements so that they are safe to environment. And we are trying to convince them to our suppliers to join to the initiative, to have constant check if they are using the right chemistry. So what exact dyes they are using, sorry, I cannot say, but we believe and we know that they are using this safe chemistry.
Thank you very much. Esben, I come back to you on the former question on this issue of addressing, outside of the scope of the company, sustainability issues. How do you see that? You made surveys. Do you think the companies, they are doing progress, improvements in taking into account, these external outside of their scope,
In a sense, I'm an optimist, at least looking from where I started some years ago. I think there's been progress. There are certainly some things that are much more common now than just 5-10 years ago. I think sometimes the issue is that companies are doing, I would say, some of the standard issues. I mean, they don't kind of question the fundamental ways of doing business. It's more about, getting a certificate, getting a label, almost exclusively on the products. I think maybe sometimes the problem is the ambition, but I think overall, I think that the fashion sector have moved forward and is on a higher level today, without doubt, than 5 years ago. That would be my take on it. So.
Thank you very much. Another question to you, Esben. You mentioned about teaching material for primary school. Educating the next generation is so important. So I would like to know more about that and if these materials are available.
Yes, a few years ago we got some funding for testing education material on sustainable fashion on primary schools. I think it was from 7th to 9th grade, because we developed it in English, so it has to be some kids who could speak reasonably English. And it was quite a success. An interesting part was that I think the results differed a lot also of what type of primary schools and where the primary schools were located and so on. But that's another issue. But it was very well received by the teachers and the children. Also because I don't know how things are in Poland and in other countries, but school teachers are under pressure and they need some good teaching material that they can use without too much preparation. I think the only thing that was maybe that we didn't think enough about was to kind of integrate it into kind of the existing primary school institutions in Denmark. So we needed some buy-in from some of the municipalities and so on. And it was difficult for us to move from the pilot or the project to get it online throughout Denmark. And that's still something that we have discussed how to do it. But it's I can write it in a box, but it's called sustainabilityforschools.org. So I can just put it in there, and it's very easy to use. So yeah.
Okay, very, very interesting. So it's available, in fact.
Yeah, it's available.
Okay. So if you could put the link, it could be useful for all our audience. I think through the discussion tool, which is on your screen, it could be useful to the audience. And also a question to you, Esben. How do you see the evolution of awareness to these topics from your students?
I would say, I don't know how it is globally, but I think from a CBS perspective, it's much easier today to work with sustainability and CSR than just 10 years ago. But we never had problems with students interested in these matters, but it's just becoming more mainstream at business schools that now it has to be taught at the different programs and so on. So I think there's always been an interest from students, but it has been difficult actually to get it into the programs at CBS and other institutions, because if you put something in, then you have to take something out. So you'll always make somebody angry if you try to do that. But today it's very easy to address sustainability at educational institutions.
I don't know. Do you see and hear me? Because I had a problem. It's okay, or because I don't see. Yes, it's.
Yes, it's okay.
It's okay. Fine. Thank you very much. So I think there is another question. If I could have it. So do we have questions from the audience?
I think there's somebody in kind of to Aleksandra. I can see at least a few on the right hand side.
Yes, I can see it as well. I will read it. Okay.
Yes, so because I don't see them. I don't.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
How do clients react to your sustainable approach? As now big companies have often problem with being accused about greenwashing. Does it happen? Is a different reaction in different countries? Is there any special path you have to communicate, educate at the same time? We, because I work in LPP for almost 2 years now, as I remember, for those 2 years, we do not have any problems with accusations of greenwashing. And I believe that is because our teams, which are involved in sustainable actions, are very dedicated. Those people are very good educated, and they are not only like work in LPP and that not only do their job, but they are in some kind of involving in protecting the environment. So we are very careful about our sustainable development strategy, about our actions. We are taking it into considerations twice before we release any actions. And also there was a question about different countries. No, I believe we do not have different reactions in different countries. And also question was, is there any special path you have to communicate, educate at the same time? So first of all, we educate our workers, because this is also very important to for our designers to know how to design our clothes to be good for the environment. We encouraging them to use more eco, let's call it eco materials. Yes, this is one way of educational path. And also we educate our customers by our social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook, and those platforms grew up a lot with the last couple of months because we kind of moved to online, and we are posting a lot of stories, a lot of interesting posts that should engage our customers to also take actions and to educate them. So yeah, that's our moves.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't see the questions anymore. I don't know why. I don't know if the technique arrange that, because I have no questions on my Q&A. So if you could take the next.
No, I can't see any of the questions for me directly.
And for Esben, probably.
I saw there was a question on what kind of companies or people were interested in the MOOC, this massive open online course.
The Coursera MOOC, yeah.
Yes, it was one of the good things was, of course, that it allowed us to reach another audience than kind of the usual audience of research publication. It was practitioners, and it was to a large extent practitioners from India and the US and Italy, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know why we got that distribution of that is general. So it was a very mixed group, and I think that is one thing that was very important to us, because we actually tried before also to actually go to some of the developing countries and talk with some of the, I would say, suppliers out there, and maybe go beyond, the brands in the West before, and we have not really been so successful in doing that. So I think that we were kind of, it was possible for us to get learners from all over the world, and especially countries like India. I think that was very good. I think we have something like, was it 38,000 learners, and then I think almost 3,000 who got a certificate in the end. That means when you're taking all the modules and made a final assignment, then you can get a certificate. So I think we are able to kind of reach quite a lot of people with this.
And part of the Coursera is complimentary, or you have to pay for everything, or part of it?
It's free, except if you want the certificate, as I understand. We don't get anything really from it, but if you want to get the certificate, you need to pay $10 or something like that.
So it's
very, very limited.
Very easy. Thank you very much. Any other question? You don't see, both of you, you don't see more questions. I think we are approaching the end of our session. So thank you very much for you two, Aleksandra and Esben. It was very, very interesting, and I'm sure that the audience was very, very pleased to hear you. And I hope that we could share, new information and new thoughts at the next session of the Global Fashion Conference. So thank you very much to all of you, and see you. I'm sure in the next session on sustainability again, because we will have to deal with this issue, for for a long time. Thank you very much.